If I attack with Raydn for 0, what are you going to do about it? Hi friends, welcome back to Nearly Same Games. I'm Neil, and this is the Armory Report. Now, last night's Armory was a Blitz Armory, and we took our yellow Boltyn list, which I'll include a video in the links below, to see how he would fare against the current meta. So this was 4 rounds, and the first round was against Lexi. Now this was kind of the hybrid Lexi build, a little bit of lightning, a little bit of ice, and turns out that for us it seemed like there was a lot of ice, and Boltyn really doesn't like getting those frostbite tokens. Well, regular Boltyn really doesn't like that. Turns out yellow Boltyn does okay with that. There are chances that we could take a hit, grab a frostbite token, and still be able to use our yellow pitch to get out of it. It's not great. We're not real happy about it, but we can manage with it. But Lexi comes in with some really big attacks, and it's a little bit much for the armor that we have. So there are times where you're going to have to block from hand, and that's really not what Boltyn wants to do. So there were a lot of times where I would just start blocking out with everything I had. If I'm going to get a frostbite token, I'm not going to have a good turn. Sometimes it's just better to block out and wait to next turn. The thing about Lexi is she's very dependent on having very good hands all the time. And a lot of the time she can get very good hands and swing for 9 or 2 swings for 6 or a lot of combinations that are going to put you in a problematic situation. Or she flips over an ice card and gives you a frostbite token to start off with, and now you got to deal with that. So towards the end of this match, we stayed pretty even. I worked on getting my shots in when you can. The thing about Lexi is that she needs a lot of cards. And if you can start pulling cards out of her hand, she's going to get a lot weaker very quickly. And that's what we focused on. And the nice thing about this Boltyn build is he's not quite as dependent on having those charges, having those big turns. He can have reasonable turns without having a lot charged, without having just being able to get in there and keep throwing attacks. And if he doesn't have a lot of cards in his soul, that's okay. We're not dependent on having those big via the Vanguard turns or needing to use sabers repeatedly. We're not dependent on those turns. So if we're throwing an attack over for 5 and that's all we have, sometimes that's okay. So we got to the last part of the match, and I'm starting to block out my whole hand, and I got Lexi down to 1, but she kept coming back with these big hits, and so I would be blocking with 2 cards here and 2 cards there, and I have nothing. But the thing I forgot for a few turns, but then it clicked in my brain that I needed to remember was that I still had Raydn, and Raydn attacks for 0. Now, if you haven't charged that turn, Raydn also has 0 power, but the attack is totally free. And this plays some major head games with our opponent. You swing Raydn for 0, and what I generally like to do is to start setting that up early and start swinging for 0 early so that the opponent knows that I'm bluffing. I have no cards in hand. I have nothing on the board that pumps it up. Swing for 0. All right, no blocks. All right, no reactions. and I draw back up. But if you can establish that, then you'll throw them off their guard when you actually do have something. At this point, I didn't have something, but if you can get a card in your arsenal and you have a tunic counter available, you threaten a Razor Reflex. And this lets you start swinging for Raydn for 0 and having your opponent block. And now this costs you nothing. You have to have that card. You have to show something. Although sometimes your opponent will block anyway because they're at 1. Anything that's going on here, you've got shenanigans. I don't understand. And you can tell them everything that you have on the board. You don't have to tell them that you don't have any way to pump up Raydn. You can present everything that you have on the board. You say, I have a tunic counter available. My Brave Forge Bracers requires that the weapon hit once before I can pump it up. My Skullcap obviously does nothing. My Snapdragon Scalers will allow me to have go again, but who cares? I have no cards in hand, no resources floating. There's nothing I can do. I don't have to tell you that part of it. I will give you the information of all the pieces on my board. I will read Boltyn's abilities, and you're going to have to deduce for yourself that this is a fake out. And sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't, but when it does work, especially against Lexi, if you're pulling cards from her hand, that's what you need. That's the break that you're going to need, and there's the potential that you mess up her hand enough to get some damage in. And that's kind of what happened. I started swinging Raydn for 0 and I had nothing, and eventually I got a Razor Reflex in my arsenal, and I kept swinging Raydn for 0, and he started blocking, but that didn't give him, I didn't have to use the Razor Reflex if I was going to get blocked out. So I was able to pull it. What happened was I was able to pull enough cards from their hand that I was able to swing in with a 0 cost attack. I was able to hold a card, swing in with a 0 cost attack. I believe it was for 4. They blocked exactly 4, and then I was able to Razor out of the arsenal for the win. And a very close game. Lexi has, I think, matured a lot, and her game plan is pretty strong. Getting the Frostbite tokens is devastating for our plan, and there are a lot of times where we're just blocking out, which is not what Boltyn wants to do. But we managed to come back okay from that. There was no means, this was not a blowout by any means. This was a very tight race. For round 2, I was against an Ira. This is not where I want to be ever. And we took some big hits. We tried to get some big return attacks. I did manage to get a big combo take flight with a barrage with a battlefield blitz into a command and conquer, and really the yellows in this deck allowed us to do that. So there were some big hits coming through. I got some good damage through. In the end, it was he was at 3, I was at 2 life, and he brought in a command and conquer for 7, and I couldn't block it. And that was a follow-up to their first attack, which I think was for 5. I pulled 2 cards out of my hand to try to block that, and then the command conquer for 7. I wasn't able to block it out, and he ended up killing me. Ira's a really tough match, and I think Ninja in general is very problematic. It's very strong, especially in Blitz. Don't really know what to do about it. You need to have the big attacks to come back with. The fact that Flick Flack is so efficient makes it really difficult to manage to survive with that. And the fact that they can do so much, they have so much go again that they can lay out their hand with very little resources and offer constant pressure. It's a very difficult match. I have a problem with that in every match that I play, so I'm not sure what to do about that. So I lost that round and go to round 3, and it's Ira again. Well, this is the same story, second verse, except this Ira player I think was better than my first Ira player, which is odd. But I started strong, got a good starting attack, got some good damage in there. I think I pulled out a Razor Reflex for some extra damage, but I just can't keep up with Ira. Ira threatens so much damage every turn, pulls cards out of my hand. Boltyn doesn't want that to happen, and I can't keep up. And there are times that if I want to return fire, I can't block, or I have to block very little, and my return isn't good enough for their defenses. And if you get to a low life total, you're done. And this Ira had played 2 sigils on me, so was up an additional 6 life. He was at 9, and I was at 1 when I lost that match. So another round done. Round 4 was against Lexi again. I don't know what was going on with this Armory event, but it felt like everyone was playing Ira and Lexi to me. And this is another match where Boltyn has to do a lot of blocking, which really doesn't want to do. Channel Lake Frigid is a card, and it's a very powerful card, and very powerful against Boltyn. So when Channel Lake Frigid comes out, I think when that came out, I ended up with a Frostbite token on that turn, and I just blocked out. I saw Lake Frigid coming. I think he flipped it to give me a Frostbite token, and then threw whatever he had at me, and I just used my hand for blocking. I knew that I could not efficiently do pretty much anything on my turn. My turn was lost, so I might as well block the damage, and let's see how long he can keep Lake Frigid alive. It turns out not long, because Lake Frigid died next turn, and I was back in the game after that. But the thing about Frostbite tokens, the thing about Channel Lake Frigid, if you don't interact with it, if you don't try to fight through it, it doesn't do anything. So I would say if you're using Channel Lake Frigid, you should be setting up your next turn to be a great turn, and you should use that time to get the right setup. The attack through it, for me, was just all about blocking it. So I'll block out and I'll try again next turn. If you don't have a good follow-up, then it's fine for me. And Channel Lake Frigid goes away, and I don't have to worry about it again. And I think that's what is difficult about these hybrid Lexi builds, is that an Ice Lexi might be able to keep that Channel Lake Frigid around for multiple turns. But when you have this combination of lightning and ice, you don't have enough consistency to make that a real threat. So this is a game where I started swinging Naked Raydn early. I'm blocking out my hand. I don't have a Frostbite token this turn. Here's Raydn. And I did pull a card from his hand with nothing. I did get him down to 1, he was at 1, I was at 2, and here's Raydn for 0. I have nothing. I have absolutely nothing. And just the fear of that, I did have my my tunic counter, so I do have a resource. Maybe that resource does something, and I was able to pull a card from his hand on nothing. But the next turn, I was able to arsenal a card, and the card that I arsenaled was a Beacon of Victory. I had 1 card in soul. Now I'm presenting a real threat, but it doesn't know exactly what card that is, and I still have my tunic resource, so that could be a Razor Reflex. So now I can pull cards out of his hand for free. And now when I swing Raydn, he blocks for 4, which is 2 cards. And this gave me, I think, the window that I needed to come back. My next hand had a Bolting Blade in it, I think, and a yellow card and a red card. So I was able to throw my Bolting Blade, pitching everything I had, and using my tunic resource. He blocked for 7. I was fatigued. I had a Courageous Steel hand that I was going to be drawing up next turn, and that was the end of my run. If he had managed to overblock this, that would have been the end. He blocked for 7. I think he was close to fatigue as well, because again, Lexi's using a lot of cards. I'm using a lot of cards to block, and so he blocked for exact 7, and I was able to pull out the Beacon of Victory and pump it by 1 for free, and that made the difference. So don't forget that if you're playing Boltyn and you have Raydn and you have nothing else to do, Raydn is still a threat, and there's still a chance that you can pull cards from their hand and get them to change their strategy. The first card I pulled from their hand, he said later that he didn't have any use for that in the next turn, but that could have been an arsenal card. And you want to make sure that you are using all of your tools available to you to get whatever advantage you can. And I think that swinging Raydn for 0 is what won me that match. So, and won me the first match. So don't forget that. Don't forget that if you can confuse your opponent, then there's an advantage to that. I was swinging Raydn for 0 against Ira, and against one of the Iras, and they weren't having it. They would just take the 0, but they had a big life advantage on me, and so that doesn't work as well. But when you're down to the wire, that 0 Raydn presents potentially something. Something's up. What's going on? And also, the more that you can establish that I'm swinging Raydn for 0 and I don't have anything, the more that they will be accepting of, you probably don't have anything, I'm just going to take the 0. But when you do have something, then you can potentially come back for lethal. Yeah, so that was the Armory event. 2-2, obviously not what I would like. I would like a better record than that, but I think that the yellow build of Boltyn has a lot of promise, and I feel that having those extra resources really changed how I could fight against Ice Lexi, and I think that gave me an advantage that the 0 cost Boltyn would not have had. So far I'm kind of liking the build, and I just find it interesting, and I think that there is more room to play with that. So that's all for this week. Next week we are doing a Sealed Monarch event. The Armory report's going to be late on that because of the holidays, but I do have an interesting box opening that will go live on Christmas Day noon Central Time. So keep an eye out for that. Have a holiday box opening that that you might find interesting. Until then, this has been the Armory Report.